The morning she burned the hollandaise was the morning everything changed, though she wouldn't understand that for weeks. Valentina Cruz stood in the service kitchen of the Hotel Marchetti in Milan, scraping a scorched saucepan into the sink at 6:47 a.m. Her third double shift in 4 days, and she thought, "This is fine." She said it out loud, quietly, the way people say things they need to hear spoken in a human voice before they can believe them. She wiped her hands on the back of her apron, started the sauce again, and did not notice the black car that had been parked across the street since before she arrived. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the man who owned that car had already decided she was the best chef in the city, and that in 22 days he would sit across from her with tears running down his face over an answer she gave him, and it would be the most honest thing either of them had ever said to another person. Valentina had been cooking at the Marchetti for 4 years, and she moved through the kitchen the way only someone who had cooked in grief moves, with complete attention to the food, because the food asked nothing of her. She was 31, wide-hipped and strong-armed, with flour permanently under her fingernails, and a way of tasting a sauce that made the sous chef, Marco, stop what he was doing every time just to watch her face. She always looked briefly startled, then peaceful. It was, Marco told her once, the face of a person who trusted themselves completely. She had $41,200 in debt from her mother's last 3 hospital stays. She knew the number without looking it up the way you know the number of steps to your front door. Her mother had died 11 months ago, and Valentina still cooked for 3 every Sunday. The full meal, the table set, 3 places. She sat at the head of the table and ate until the candles burned low. The apartment in the Tysonese was 47 square meters, and every Sunday it smelled like feast days. She did not talk about her mother at work. The hotel had a new ownership group as of 6 months ago. Valentina had received a memo about it. She had not thought much about it. Ownership groups did not typically affect hollandaise. The first time she saw Raphael Marchetti, he was standing in the corridor outside the kitchen at 7:20 a.m. on a Tuesday, talking in low Italian to a man in a dark suit, and she nearly walked directly into him carrying a tray of ramekins. He caught the tray. His hands were very steady. She said "Mi scusi" without looking up, registered dark hair and a very good watch, and went back to service. He watched her walk away. He did not say anything. He turned back to the conversation with his second, Enzo, and the conversation did not noticeably change. But Enzo, who had worked for Raphael Marchetti for 9 years and could read a room with surgical precision, noticed that his employer had gone approximately 2 degrees quieter and filed it. The kitchen door swung shut. The black car was still across the street. The public humiliation came 11 days later, at a private luncheon on the hotel's rooftop terrace. Valentina was overseeing service personally because the client had requested a specific tasting menu that required hands-on calibration between courses. The client was Alessandro Ferrante, ex-husband, though Valentina had not known this when she accepted the booking, and did not have time to register it properly when she walked out with the amuse-bouche and found him seated at the head of the table. He registered it before she did. He smiled the specific kind of smile that means I am about to enjoy something. Alessandro was 53, bespoke suit. The kind of man who had spent his adult life measuring things against standards only he could see and finding them insufficient. He had been Valentina's husband for 4 years, and she had left him in the middle of their 5th year, on a Thursday afternoon, while he was at a board meeting, and he had never forgiven her the practicality of it. "Valentina," he said her name like a verdict. "I didn't know you were working here." "The kitchen, actually," she said. Pleasantly, "I'll send someone to." "No, no." He turned to the woman beside him, younger, polished, watching with careful attention. This is the woman I told you about. Valentina. She was a reasonably competent cook when we were together. He tilted his head, studying her with the particular attentiveness of a man who has been waiting for this moment and would like to maximize it. You've really let yourself go, haven't you? The terrace went quiet the way rooms go quiet when someone has crossed a line loud enough to be heard. Valentina's face stayed still. She had had 4 years of practice at this face. She felt her voice come out steadier than she expected, and she noticed this as a small private thing, and she kept it. The risotto will arrive in approximately 8 minutes, she said. Is there anything about the tasting menu you'd like to adjust? Alessandro's smile widened. I'm only saying what everyone's thinking. He waved a hand. You always did make excuses instead of dealing with the truth. Enjoy the meal, she said. She turned and walked back toward the kitchen. She did not move quickly. She did not let herself move quickly. The door was 30 feet away, and she counted every step. She was not aware of the man in the dark suit at the corner of the terrace, a glass of water in his hand, who had been there the entire time. She was not aware that his jaw had gone very tight. She was not aware of what his eyes looked like when they moved from Alessandro Ferrante's face to the kitchen door that had just closed behind her. Enzo was. Enzo took out his phone and made one short call. Raphael Marchetti appeared in the service kitchen at 8:15 that evening. Valentina was breaking down her station, and she looked up and recognized the corridor, the watch, the steadiness. You're the owner, she said. Yes. He crossed his arms and leaned against the counter that ran along the far wall. And nothing about his posture was aggressive, but nothing about it was casual either. Are you all right? I'm fine. That wasn't a performance of concern, he said. I'm asking because I want an accurate answer. She set down the cloth she was holding. She looked at him properly for the first time. He was in his early 40s, dark-haired, with a face that had been lived in honestly, and eyes the color of good espresso that were watching her with a focused attention that had nothing performative in it. I'm fine, she said again, and this time it was slightly more true. Ferrante has been a client of this hotel for 11 years, he said. He won't be returning. You don't need to. I'm not doing it for you, Raphael said. I'm doing it because I don't permit that in my hotel. A pause. He looked at the station she was breaking down, the clean efficiency of it, the fact that every surface was already immaculate before she'd started on the tools. How long have you been cooking? She thought about it. Since I was 7. He nodded, as if this confirmed something. My grandmother had the same answer. He uncrossed his arms. There will be a new booking at your station Thursday morning. Private client, 7 a.m., the small dining room on the 2nd floor. I'm told the request is specific. He looked at her steadily. You'll be the only chef I trust with it. She held his gaze for a moment. I haven't agreed to anything. No, he said. You haven't. He picked up his jacket from the counter and left. Valentina stood in the kitchen for a long moment. She thought about the kitchen door being 30 feet away and not moving quickly toward it. She thought about how it felt to be recognized by a person who didn't want anything from her. She picked up the cloth and finished breaking down the station, and she didn't notice until she was halfway home that she was walking differently. Lighter, like something she'd been carrying had shifted. Not down, just redistributed. The Thursday booking was for Raphael himself. She figured this out in the first 30 seconds. The small dining room on the 2nd floor had a single table laid for one. The request that had been filed was traditional Milanese cooking. Nothing formal, whatever she thinks is right. That phrase, whatever she thinks is right, had made her stop reading the request for a moment. because no booking ever said that. She made risotto alla Milanese with saffron from a small estate in Abruzzo that she'd been sourcing herself for 3 years, and ossobuco prepared the way her mother had prepared it, low and long in a pan that was too old to be aesthetically acceptable in a professional kitchen, but that produced a result she could not replicate with any other vessel. She brought it herself. He was at the table, a document open in front of him that he closed when she entered, without making the closing look deliberate. She set the plate down. He looked at the food the way she looked at a sauce, with real attention, not performance. "Sit down," he said. "I'm working. The kitchen is closed. Sit down." She sat, because something about the directness of it left no room for argument that wasn't about something else. She poured herself water from the carafe and said nothing. He took the first bite. He was quiet for a long time. "My grandmother made risotto like this," he said finally, not a compliment. A statement of fact. Something he was giving her. "The saffron is from Abruzzo," she said. "I know." He looked up. "I've been trying to find that saffron for 15 years. She wrote the supplier's name and phone number on a piece of paper she had in her apron pocket, because she had suspected this might come up, and she slid it across the table. He looked at the paper for a moment. Then, at her. "You came prepared," he said. "I cook for people I'm going to meet," she said. "I try to know what they need." "And what did you decide I need?" "The ossobuco is still on the pass," she said, and stood, and went back to the kitchen. She heard something behind her that might have been a laugh. She wasn't certain. She decided it was. One night at 11:30 she was making coffee in the empty kitchen, and he walked in, and neither of them commented on the coincidence of it, because it wasn't quite a coincidence anymore. "You cook when you can't sleep," he said. "I always cook," she said. "Sleep happens when it happens." He sat on the counter, which was not a thing owners typically did, and she handed him a coffee without asking if he wanted one, and he took it without comment. "You're not from Milan," she said. "Catanzaro originally. Calabria, your grandmother's risotto was Milanese." A pause. "She moved when she married." He held the coffee cup with both hands. "She died 4 years ago. I kept the recipe, but not the proportion of something. I've never been able to get it right." Valentina didn't say anything for a moment. "The saffron has to bloom in the stock before the stock goes into the rice, not in the fat. Most people bloom it in the butter, and it's never the same." He was quiet, looking at his coffee. "She did something with her hands when she stirred it," he said, not quite to her. "A specific motion. I watched her 100 times and I still can't." He stopped. "Tell me about her," Valentina said. She had said it quietly, and he looked up at the directness of it. And then he talked. About the apartment in Catanzaro, where his grandmother had lived until she was 83. About the Sunday meals that ran from noon until dark. About the way she had called all of his business associates the nervous boys, regardless of rank or reputation. About the fact that she had died without knowing the full scope of what he was, and that he would never know whether she'd known and chosen not to ask, and that not knowing was the thing that sat with him. At the end he said, "You asked." "You needed to be asked," she said. He set the coffee cup down. He looked at her the way he had looked at the risotto, with real attention. "Do you always know what people need?" "No," she said. "I'm wrong about it constantly. What do you think you need?" She thought about the table set for 3 on Sunday nights, about the $41,200, about the walk from the terrace door that she'd counted. "Time," she said. I need time for some things." He nodded, not to signal that he understood, but to signal that he was keeping the answer, storing it carefully. He left at 12:40. Valentina stood in the kitchen after the elevator had gone, and she thought, careful. She thought it because she was already not being careful. The first sign she noticed, but didn't understand, arrived on a Wednesday, 3 weeks in. A man she'd seen before, compact, gray jacket, reading a newspaper he never turned the page of, was at the caf table directly across from the Marchetti entrance. He had been there the previous Wednesday. She noticed it the way you notice something the second time, not with alarm, but with a small internal question mark that she carried into the kitchen and set aside. She was thinking about the ossobuco timing. She set the question mark aside. That evening, Enzo appeared at the kitchen door at 10 p.m., which had happened a handful of times when Raphael had an off-site commitment and wanted dinner held. Enzo was polite and specific, and never made small talk, which was why Valentina liked him. He handed her a folded piece of paper. It was a menu for a dinner the following night. Private, off-premises, her cooking. She opened her mouth to say she'd need more information about the venue. The venue is the Marchetti penthouse, Enzo said. Signor Marchetti's son will be there. She had not known there was a son. How old? 8. A very slight shift in Enzo's expression. He prefers to eat only things that are yellow. This is a current phase, and we are not fighting it. Risotto, scrambled eggs, polenta pastina with butter, she said immediately. Enzo looked at her for one long second. Correct, he said. He almost smiled. She went the next evening. The penthouse was not decorated the way she'd expected. Not cold or formal. Books on every horizontal surface, including the floor. LEDs along the windows overlooking the Duomo. On the low shelf nearest the couch, a row of wooden letters spelled out a name. Luca. The boy was at the kitchen island, coloring with a seriousness she recognized. The same face she made over a sauce that needed correction. He had his father's eyes and the look of a child who had decided to be polite to new people and was executing it carefully. You're the chef, he said. I'm Valentina. Papa said you make good risotto. Your father makes good risotto. Luca considered this information. He never makes it anymore. She set her bags on the counter and began unpacking. Why not? A pause. He says he hasn't gotten it right since Nana died. She didn't look at him right away. She unpacked the saffron and the stock she'd made from scratch that afternoon, and the pan that was too old to be professionally acceptable, and she said, Would you want to make it tonight? Together, he got off the stool so fast it scraped on the floor. Raphael arrived at 7:30. Luca met him at the elevator with a bowl of risotto he had largely stirred himself and was presenting in both hands with the gravity of someone handing over something irreplaceable. Raphael looked down at the bowl. Then at Valentina, standing in the kitchen doorway. He looked back at his son. She went back into the kitchen to plate the polenta and did not watch his face. But she heard the sound he made. Low, brief, caught in the back of the throat. And she thought, there you are. She thought it the way you think something when you finally understand what a thing is for. The gray-jacketed man stopped being in the caf across the street. She didn't notice his absence until she noticed it had been 3 days. She went back to the question mark she'd set aside, and it had grown slightly. On a Thursday afternoon, Marco said something strange. He said, I saw your ex-husband's restaurant in the news. Valentina looked up from the beurre blanc. I didn't know he had a restaurant. He did until last week. Marco chose his next words carefully. There were some questions about the liquor licensing and the financial structure, something with the health and safety registration. He paused. It was very specific. She said nothing. I just thought it was interesting timing, Marco said, after the terrace. That's all. She thought about the car she had noticed across the street 3 weeks ago. She thought about the question mark. She thought about Enzo making one short call on the terrace. She finished the beurre blanc, and it was correct, and she tasted it twice. She thought, he did it before I asked. Without telling me. Without wanting me to know. She thought, this is the thing I need to be careful about. The phone call came on a Saturday. She was in the Marchetti kitchen at 8 p.m. And her phone rang with a number she didn't know, and when she answered it, the voice was Alessandro's. You've been busy, he said. Or someone has been busy for you. I don't know what you're talking about. I think you do. His voice had lost the social veneer. Underneath it was something meaner, stripped. Tell your boyfriend that what he did can be undone. Tell him I have friends in offices he hasn't visited yet. She heard something in the corridor outside the kitchen. It was not a sound she had heard before. It was the sound of a presence. She said, I'll pass that along, and she hung up. She pushed open the kitchen door. The corridor was empty, except for Enzo, who was standing 30 feet away, not looking at her, examining something on his phone with complete composure. Enzo, she said. Yes, chef. Is there anything I should know? A pause. Signor Marchetti has suggested you not walk home alone this week. He put his phone in his pocket. I can arrange transportation. Tell me why. Ferrante made inquiries about your schedule, Enzo said, with the neutrality of a weather report. They were answered with incorrect information. As a precaution, where is Raphael right now? Enzo hesitated. A fraction of a second. The 3rd floor. She took off her apron. She walked to the elevator and pressed 3. 3rd office on the left, light on. She knocked once and opened the door. Raphael was behind the desk, phone to his ear. He looked up when she entered. He said something into it, brief Calabrian dialect, and put it down. He called you, Raphael said. Not a question. You had his restaurant shut down. I had certain irregularities brought to the attention of the relevant regulatory bodies, he said. This is not the same thing. And the man in the gray jacket across the street, a beat. A precaution. You were watching my building. I was ensuring your safety. He said it with perfect steadiness, the way he said everything. You did this without telling me. Yes, why? He was quiet for a moment. A real pause, not a strategic one. Because you would have said you didn't need it. She stood very still. I might have. You would have. Something moved in his expression, and you would have been wrong. And you would have been in a dangerous situation because of a man I permitted into my hotel. And that is not acceptable to me. I'm not something you're responsible for. I know that, he said quietly. I'm choosing to be responsible for you anyway. That's different. She looked at him across the desk. The office had books in it too. Same stacked quality as the penthouse. Same sense of a person who read in the way other people breathed. On the corner of the desk there was a paperback, face down, spine broken at approximately page 47, as if it had been set down mid-chapter and not picked back up. She looked at it. What is that? She asked. He glanced at it, a very brief look, quickly away. A book my wife was reading when she died. He said it simply, without theater. I moved it there when I moved into this office. I don't read it, I just have it there. The room was quiet. Valentina said, How long ago? 6 years. She thought about the table set for 3. She thought about the kettle still marked for 3 cups. She thought about the thing you keep doing because stopping would mean something you aren't ready for it to mean. Luca doesn't know, she said. Not a question. He knows she's gone. He doesn't know that I still. He stopped. He looked, for one moment, like the most ordinary man she'd ever seen. He's 8. He told me you don't make the risotto anymore. Raphael looked up at her. Because you haven't gotten it right, she said. Since she died. He was absolutely still. The reason you haven't gotten it right, she said, is that it was never about getting it right. It was always about her. She came forward and sat down across from him, uninvited, the way she'd sat down to coffee in the kitchen that first night. The proportion of the saffron isn't wrong. You're the wrong ingredient. You're cooking it from grief instead of. She stopped. Instead of what? He said, very quietly. Instead of the same place she cooked it from. She met his eyes. From wanting someone else to feel good. The office was very still. Outside the window, Milan ran its lights across the dark. Somewhere below, a car turned onto the Via Manzoni. The book sat on the corner of the desk at page 47. Raphael Marchetti looked at Valentina Cruz across the desk, and something happened in his face that she had not seen there before. Something that was not control. Something that came from a deeper place than the authority, or the competence, or the steadiness. And it arrived quietly, the way grief arrives in private, and his eyes were very bright. He didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he said, "Name your price to leave." She looked at him. "I mean it," he said. "Whatever you need, the debt cleared, a position somewhere else, a kitchen of your own. Name what you need to walk out of this hotel and away from my family and back to a life that is less complicated than this one." He was trying to give her an exit because what he felt was large enough to be a risk, and he was removing her from it the same way he'd removed the gray-jacketed man from across her street. He was protecting her from himself. She thought about what she'd said. The wrong ingredient. Cooking from grief instead of from love. She said, "I don't want a price." He waited. "I want the Sunday meal," she said. The full one. At a table where someone is supposed to be sitting, she kept her eyes on his. "I've been setting 3 plates every Sunday for 11 months and eating alone. I'm not going to do that forever. I'm telling you because you asked." She paused. "And I want to teach Luca to bloom the saffron in the stock, not the fat, in the stock." Raphael Marchetti did not look away from her. She watched his face do the thing it had done when his son handed him the bowl. The thing caught in the throat. The thing you only show by accident when you've stopped being able to prevent it. His eyes were absolutely full. "Those are your terms," he said. His voice was almost steady. "Those are my terms," she said. He nodded once. He looked down at the desk. He put his hand over his eyes. She sat with him. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Some things you sit with in complete quiet, and the sitting is the thing itself, and the quiet is the respect you give to what is actually happening in a room. After a long time, he took his hand away. His eyes were clear, the clarity that comes after something releases. "Sunday," he said. "Sunday," she said. Alessandro Ferrante discovered that the 3 companies through which he had been laundering operating costs since 2019 had been identified, documented, and referred simultaneously to the Guardia di Finanza and 2 investigative journalists at Corriere della Sera. The articles ran Thursday. His lawyer did not return his call for 6 hours. A different lawyer told him to expect proceedings spanning 2 to 4 years, during which his access to liquid assets would be restricted. The restaurant closed. The Marchetti hotel booking he had held for 11 years was quietly transferred to a competing property before the articles even ran. He was not told that. He was not told a great many things. The $41,200 in medical debt had already been addressed through a legal settlement structured by Raphael's attorney as standard management of a contractual relocation agreement. When the hotel formalized Valentina's role as executive chef, the settlement was an industry-standard signing arrangement, her name not appearing in the external paperwork at all. She learned about it when Enzo handed her a single-page document to sign. She read it twice. She looked at him. "He said you'd want the terms explained in full," Enzo said. "The short version, it belongs to you. The structure is standard. No one can reverse it." She signed it. She thought, he keeps every promise, even the ones he made quietly, to himself, where she couldn't hear him. Luca learned to bloom the saffron in the stock on a Sunday morning in October. He stood on a step stool at the counter in the Marchetti penthouse kitchen, in an apron that was too big for him, and he poured the saffron into the warm stock with extreme care, his tongue slightly out with concentration, and Valentina stood beside him with her hands in her pockets and did not help him unless he asked. He did not ask. He stirred the risotto for 22 minutes, which is longer than most people have the patience for, counting under his breath by threes because she had told him counting made it go faster. Raphael sat at the island with coffee and a document he was not reading, watching his son stir. At one point Luca said, "Is it right?" Valentina tasted it. She was briefly startled, then peaceful. "It's right," she said. They ate at the table at noon, 3 plates, full meal, the table set properly, the window open onto the city. Luca ate with both hands on the bowl and made a sound of pure approval that made Raphael laugh, a real laugh, unguarded, aimed at his son. Valentina looked at the two of them. She thought, here. She thought it the way you think something when you've been looking for it long enough that you almost stopped recognizing what you were looking for. At some point in the late afternoon, when Luca had fallen asleep on the couch with a book open on his chest, Raphael sat beside her at the table, with the remains of the meal between them and the light going golden over the Duomo. He said, "You knew, the first time you made this, that I needed it." I suspected. How? She thought about it. Because you sat across from me, and you'd been alone with something for a long time, and you needed someone to notice that without making it into a thing to be fixed. She looked at him. I cook for people I'm going to meet. I try to know what they need. He was quiet. What did you decide I needed? He said. The same question he'd asked her that first morning. His one question finally, she looked at the table. 3 plates, full meal. The late light. His son sleeping with a book. This, she said. The same thing I needed. He put his hand on the table between them, not quite touching hers. Close enough that she could feel the warmth of it. She put her hand over his. Outside, Milan was going golden and bright in the last of the afternoon, and somewhere in the city the saffron supplier's number was on a piece of paper in his desk, and a book sat face down at page 47, and a man she had not expected was sitting beside her in the light. She was finally seen. She carried her quiet the way other people carry things they're proud of. Not loud about it, not hidden, just present. Raphael knew who she was long before she knew he'd been paying attention. If this kind of story stays with you, the ones where the person who asks for nothing turns out to be the one who deserves everything, follow along. New story every day. Tell me in the comments, when did you first know Valentina wasn't going to name a price? Was it the terrace walk? 30 feet without moving quickly? Or was it the Sunday meals? The 3 plates? The table set for a life she was still living? I want to know which moment told you who she was. Drop it below. I read every one. And one more thing. Luca is 8 years old now, and he knows how to bloom saffron in the stock, not the fat, and he has his grandmother's hands when he stirs. What he doesn't know yet is that there's a letter in his father's desk, written the night before that first Sunday meal, that begins, for you. When you're old enough to understand what that year was, follow along. I'll be here when it's time for that one.